Hello. Hello. Sorry. Can you both hear us? Okay, so thank you for joining. Just to kind of introduce myself, so I'm Kasim, the owner of Social Instincts, and we've been attended by Ellie, who's a part of my team, and our special guest, Salenna, so Dr. Salenna, who's with us today. So thank you very much for joining. Just to let you guys know on the kind of Zoom call as well, this is recorded, just so obviously we can then circulate this to other people who are able to attend. Just for the kind of sake of this, I'll kind of set out the outline of the call and the actual Zoom call itself. So I'm just going to share my screen just 2 seconds. So what we're going to be covering today is how social media can support your sales for any business really, and we're obviously going to be focusing on aesthetic clinics. We're going to be looking at trends and insights as well, so basically the insights that are basically from Google, and then we're going to talk about the paid benefits of paid advertisement of Google, Facebook, and Instagram. Looking at content as well, so we can look to boost your engagement, influencer marketing, and then we're going to look at some of the case studies of what we actually do with some of our clients, and then we'll have a Q&A with Dr. Salenna. Has anyone got any questions before we make a start?
I think you're going to mute all the non-video participants and then...
Yeah, I've just done that, so that's fine. Okay, cool. So firstly, what we're going to be looking at is how much trends have changed since obviously the uptake in kind of social media. So what we've done is done some trend analysis on some of the kind of common trends that people look for over Google. So things such as facelift, Botox, lip fillers, for example. As you can see, year on year, there actually has been an increase of people actively searching on Google for these services. And these are basically search terms that are kind of looked at broadly over Google to see if people are looking for things like Botox over Leeds, London, wherever it may be located. As you can see here, there are trends that show that over the last kind of couple of months leading up to the lockdown actually being opened again. So the lockdown being over, we can actually see that there has been a huge uptake. So what we normally do is that we start looking at these trends to start saying how our clients should be looking at Google advertisement as a kind of key driver for the business. Ellie's going to be explaining a little bit more about how we do that and what the benefits are and how we can actually track when it comes to the Google ads and what types of campaigns we can run. But this obviously shows the demand for some of the actual treatments that you guys do as a service. And what you should be doing is looking at these trends and thinking to yourself, how can you actually maximize your returns based off what people are actually looking for? If you actually look as well from the kind of previous 3 years, majority of it has increased over time. There has been obviously a slight decrease there over 2020, which is more than likely due to lockdown. But as people have gone back into like wedding season, able to go out again and kind of socialize, this will naturally start increasing more. So that's kind of the trends and insights. And like we said before, Ellie's going to be talking a little bit more about how we do that. So over to you.
Hiya. So first of all, the main thing that you need to know about tracking and everything to do with advertisements is the customer life cycle. So you've got 3 sections. You've got a cold, a warm, and a hot. A cold audience is someone who is completely brand new, a complete stranger to your business. A warm audience is someone who's seen your business before. They maybe have a desire to come and see you, visit you, book a consultation. And then finally, you've got what's called a hot audience. So this is when this person that has a desire is then turned into a converter. So when we're doing ads, we follow the customer life cycle. The reach section is when we're wanting to drive awareness to the brand and capture people's attention. The acquisition section is when people like I said earlier, they're visiting your site with a desire in mind. These will probably be a warm audience. The conversion is when our aim is to convert these previous interested people into paying customers. This would be the hot section. We finally turn these warm audiences into hot audiences. Second to last, we want to retain these people. This is the retention section. The goal is to keep this person as a loyal customer. That then brings us into loyalty, which is when these customers start recommending you guys, your business, to friends and family, anybody that they know, because they love it so much, they keep coming back. That's the overall aim. So those are just the 5 points briefly, but that's what we follow when we are creating campaigns and advertisements. We use this funnel to ensure that you have enough data to retarget. And then from there, the only way to really know if you're retargeting correctly is by inputting tracking onto your website and onto your Facebook and Google. So the first one is Facebook pixel creation. So it's all well and good putting an ad out there, but you can't track that correctly unless you put this pixel on your website. It's a little bit of coding that you create in Facebook and you copy and paste it into your website. So simple. From that, you can create events and button tracking. So you can go into Facebook, you can go into your website, and you can create an event on book now or an event on submit form. And then that will let us know that whoever, through the ad, if someone clicks through the ad to your site and clicks book now, we will know that that's come through the ad. This helps for things like your return on investment and just to make sure that your ad's not wasting any money. On the other side of things, for Google ads, you have Google conversion tracking, which works basically the same as Pixel, but it's Google's version. So again, it's a piece of coding that you create on Google, and then you put that onto your website. Again, you can create events around this on book now button, submit form, WhatsApp, anything that you have that's clickable on your site. And finally, a good tracking thing to have is a Google tag. So this allows you to see analytics easier, it allows you to measure audiences' actions on your site, and most importantly, without the Google tag, you're not able to retarget specific audiences, which is the overall aim of, well, any advertisement tracking. You want to turn anybody that's a cold audience that's been interested in your business to a converter, and the way to track that is by creating these tracking.
Perfect, thank you. So I think what's more important is to kind of to look at what Ellie was just kind of saying is we look at a lot of kind of customer behaviors. So when we create ads, we mainly focus on the data more than anything, because the data to us is key. You can basically run ads independently just to let like Facebook do its own algorithms, for example. But if you're not kind of creating your own specific audiences targeting, you don't know what works and what doesn't. So what we do here is that we do a lot of split testing. So we kind of look at multiple adverts and multiple target audiences where we can actually see then who works. So if it's a female aged between 18 to 25, how does that compare to a male at the same age range? How does that work compared to London versus Manchester to Leeds? And then we basically look at all the kind of data, and then what we start to do is then start building things such as lookalike audience campaigns, which then basically then retargets people who are very similar behaviors as the people who have already been on the website, for example. All that can be collated when you actually start putting things such as the pixel and the tags on. And as Ali was saying earlier, without that, you wouldn't be able to recreate them audiences, so you wouldn't be able to do them duplications. So there's lots of things that happen in the background, and there's lots of testing that we actually do when it comes to creating the right pixels. The right Facebook and Google ads. It's not instantaneous as well. People, it kind of expect as soon as you put a Google advert on, it's going to just start booming, and you start going to receiving loads of sales and kind of people messaging you. But the reality is you're bidding against a lot of people who are in the same similar field to you. So what you need to do in that aspect is look at your kind of marketing spend and kind of say, how much are you willing to pay to get conversion? One of our clients, for example, spend a lot when it comes to Google ads. They look around about £8, anywhere between £4 to £8 just to get a click onto their book now button, because they want to be the number one person who's going to be at the top of the list when somebody searched for treatment in that field. So that's what they kind of look at. You don't have to spend that much, but if you bid less on your Google ads, you're more likely to be seen at the bottom of the list opposed to somebody at the top who's willing to pay. Any questions off the back of that?
No, makes sense.
Cool. So just going to talk a little bit about content creation. So we're going to do a comparison to one of the clients that we work with compared to some others. So obviously this is around dentistry, cosmetic dentistry, but the theory is pretty much exactly the same for people who work in aesthetics. So what we do for Rue, for example, is that we basically look at how we can actually keep the brand consistent. So lots of people, what they do is that they use kind of stock imagery. They don't keep the consistency when it comes to even the same filter that they always use. What you need to remember is your Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or whatever it may be, is kind of like your shop window. You need to make this look and feel as personable as possible to the person who's going to be potentially then going into your website or potentially giving you a call, because this is what's the most powerful way to attract people who aren't aware of you. If your page is really messy, it has pretty much a stock image that every other person is using, you're not going to get the same reaction as somebody who's basically who's seen it on their social media and knows what to expect when they walk through the door. What we do with the Room is that we do loads of different campaigns. So we look at just videos around the office. We do loads of behind the scenes. We also then look to do we've just done one recently, which was like meet the owner. So it kind of gives you that personal touch, so you actually know who's actually behind it. And video is very powerful. One of the most powerful campaigns that we ever have run for them is the kind of reveal videos. So just somebody seeing in this case, their smile for the first time after a composite bonding treatment is really powerful, because it shows the reaction, and people engage and interact more off feeling more than anything. People buy off feeling. So if you can show a feeling of somebody seeing themselves after treatment for the first time and kind of that, wow, this is something that's happened, that then would resonate then to other people. And they'll basically go, okay, that person had that feeling and I want that too. So it's not always necessarily just about before and after. It's also about how you can engage and make people feel. That also translates to staff as well. People want to know how warm the staff are going to be when you walk through the door. And that's what we do really well with them. We keep it really engaging. All the staff are on board, and we basically make sure that everything is aligned when it comes to somebody seeing their Instagram page, then that translating to the website as well. Also, another thing is obviously influencer stories as well. If you do use any influencers, it's kind of having, well, depending on what that contract is with the influencer, is how much you can actually document that. And what we recommend is, especially if you're looking to pay an influencer, is try to document as much as you can, from the person coming in for the first consultation, then coming back for a treatment, and also then what the reaction is for them afterwards as well, and kind of the aftercare that happens. And then if you can get something in a couple of weeks' time when kind of the treatment is kind of more not as swollen, for example, then another video or content would be great as well. And how you do that is that you set contracts with your influencers, especially if you're paying for somebody, is to actually have a contract in place so they're aware what's expected of them. You know what you're going to get in return when it comes to actually running influencer campaigns. And we'll kind of touch into influencers in a moment as well. Any questions off the back of the content creations? No. Okay, so influencer marketing then. So obviously we know there's so many of the influencers out there, and there's different variations of influencers that we work with. We work with micro influencers and kind of your big influencers as well. So just to kind of show comparisons, what people should be looking for when approaching an influencer, or if an influencer may engage you and say, oh, can you give me treatment? I'll do a free post for you. There's obviously different ways you can work with these people, and organically, the more kind of successful you become, people will start approaching you, and it's not always going to be paid. People naturally will start paying for the services because of your reputation. But when you're looking for influencers, it's always good to look at kind of key factors of how people are engaged with them. You don't want to be kind of looking at paying an influencer, for example, when the influencer's location isn't anywhere near your clinic. It just doesn't make sense, because especially if you're trying to pay for somebody, quite a lot of these influencers, for example, have global reach. And if 89% of their following is based in the US, it wouldn't make commercial sense for you to then potentially look to use them. So what you need to know is what they're known for as well, because you need to make sure it aligns to your brand when using an influencer. So what it's known for, looking at the locations, and also obviously looking at the right age range as well. You don't want too young of an audience when it comes to aesthetic clinics, obviously. So you want to make sure that they're right for your demographic, and making sure it's right for you. So you can ask for insights from influencers. They'll be able to provide this to you from their Instagram, their Facebook, or whatever means they use, from TikTok, for example. Also, the good thing to look at is engagement rates as well, because some of these smaller influencers actually have higher engagement rates than the bigger ones. So as you can see at the top, Brooke, for example, she's got 37.9 thousand followers, but her engagement rate is actually higher than Jess, who's at the bottom, who has 1.4. So what we mean by engagement is people who actually interact with them, like their posts, comment, and have that daily engagement. That's more organic when it comes to smaller people opposed to the bigger people, because people could just be engaging for different reasons. So always look at engagement rates as well. So that's kind of just a very high level what to look for when doing influencer marketing. And just finally, we just talk through a case study. So when it comes to Rue Dental, for example, we basically look at obviously what them ads look like. So this is basically the back end of Google. What we've noticed with the best time to target customers, especially over Google, is during 9-5 on Monday to Friday, because people are very kind of impatient when it comes to asking for how much is it going to cost for a treatment, for example. So if nobody's there to man the phones, for example, or take that call, it doesn't give the best impression when somebody's tried to click through the number, tries to call it, and it doesn't work. So we only run the hours of 9 to 5 for them, because we know that their staff is available during that time. Obviously, for you, it depends on your own clinic and who's going to be able to man the phones and take the actual calls off the back of it. The obviously other side of that is if we were to run something like a campaign where somebody was to press the book now button, register, your staff should be there, then be able to take them queries as soon as possible. One thing we have noticed with Rue is that we've really increased engagement when we started to add live chat, because people are in a digital world now. People are more comfortable talking over things like WhatsApp and DMing. So when you add a live chat to your website, for example, we can direct to the live chat, and basically people can then engage on there. And we've seen a huge uptake of customers who basically speak on live chat and then convert into treatment. What's happened here, so I'll kind of just talk about keywords, for example. So where we've put here, so dentist near me for braces, we can see there's been 206 clicks to that advert, and the conversion click-through rate from the impressions is around about 3%. So you're not always going to get clicked when it comes onto Google. Somebody might be flicking through, but these conversions of people clicking here are basically then potential customers. So if somebody lands onto your site, press book now, the Google ads done its job, it's done what it's meant to do. It's then for you to then convert them into customers. And yeah, so we're basically just looking at what kind of keywords have increased over time. So biggest changes for the last 30 days, for example, we know there's been a huge increase for composite bonding and other keywords, braces, for example, but then veneers has been a less of an intake for the last 30 days opposed to the month before. So that's basically what we look at when it comes to your Google ads. And we do exactly the same when it comes to Facebook and Instagram as well, to look at what works well, what doesn't, and then we basically then adjust the adverts accordingly to to the most prominent ones. So that's basically the end of our kind of like overview on what we do for our clients and what you should be doing when growing your social media as well as your advertising over Google. So just before we jump on to some questions with Salenna, is there any questions from anybody else?
I've got a question actually, Cass.
Yep.
So, you know, you've got those conversion rates up. How do you get those apart from asking for them directly of someone?
So do you mean these engagement rates here? So there's tools that you can use, you can register to, and what you do is that you basically put in there YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, because it's really easy for somebody to show you a boost in their engagement over the last couple of days because they've done a really interactive post. And then all of a sudden for the rest of it might not work. So they might be really quiet. So this just shows you in the background what engagement levels are, and the free tools out there. You just need to kind of just type in engagement tools for Instagram, and you can basically find free ones potentially what don't give you as much data, but there are some which are very high end, which you can pay for subscriptions for, which then give you a lot more in-depth data behind it as well. It shows you kind of what the keywords are that people actually use in their captions more frequently than others. And there's a lot more kind of in-depth data that you can get from that.
Okay, that's really interesting. Good to know.
Perfect. So what we'll do now is just go over to some Q&As with yourself. So I think the kind of biggest thing that people kind of want to know when starting off into the whole social media is where to start. I know that obviously people assume it's just putting a picture on Instagram and then they're going to start booming and all of a sudden everything's going to work from there. So how did you actually get into the whole social media scene? Like, what was your kind of catalyst to kind of push this as much as possible?
I'll be honest, it was like pretty much by accident. And I think when I was starting out, it was a new thing for us. And I suppose I'm lucky it was when the whole Instagram social media type of thing was just starting to sort of blow up and get big. And so my journey with kind of social media was I'd actually I'd signed up personally to sort of Instagram and used to share the odd photo and that. And then I remember looking for, like things come up on your feed or whatnot. And I remember looking for a hair colorist. So this hair colorist came up and she had like 40,000 followers at the time. That was big numbers back then. And I thought to myself, oh, wow, she's popular. I mean, she had some great like before and afters on her feed. And it made me want to go and see her essentially. So I went to see her. And I'm not joking, I turned up at this little like semi in Oldham, imagining the salon that I was going to come to. And there was just like queues of people. And she was back to back busy and, not like a proper salon environment, but this woman was like, super busy, super, really good, really talented. And it just amazed me. I was like, I can't believe people have traveled this far. Like people were there from London, from Bristol, from Edinburgh. It was just mad. And I was like, how are these people here? And she was literally just like, it's all Instagram, it's all social media. And I just could not believe it. And obviously at the time I had clinics and we were spending money on things, the generic advertising type of thing back in the day we used to do. And we had I had an account for the clinic. I didn't really, I'll be honest, I hardly ever posted on there. And looking back at some of the pictures I used to post, even now I'm like, oh, what was I doing then? So, things have come along, but that was my journey. And then it was from her that she was like, you need to do it. You need to post your before and afters. And she was like, she was really interested in what I did. And she was like, I want to come and see you and I want to do this, that, and the other. And that's really where I kind of got the idea. I thought, oh my God, yeah, I need to really do more with this account. I can do more and reach more people.
Yeah. No, definitely. So obviously, what's your kind of go-to platform? Is it mainly Instagram? Is that where you kind of see the most engagement and growth?
Yeah, so traditionally we had Facebook. I mean, we've had Facebook for years, and you know, I think on Facebook it's much harder for people to engage. I think it was very restrictive. It was, you know, you can comment and you can reply to the comment, but other than that, there wasn't really. I just think it was a much more. It was a stiffer platform, and you know, advertising back then, it was just not something that was sort of recognized and wasn't really done. So we'd always had that in the background, and then Instagram was kind of what really hit us off.
Yeah. So obviously you built your profile over Instagram. When you first kind of started off, did you start getting people on board, obviously, to kind of help out with Google advertisement, Facebook advertisement? Is that something that you did personally yourselves to grow the clinic?
So well, we used to do it through our website provider. So our website provider would do sort of like SEO type stuff, and then we were always like approached by local business people, so local like magazines, local link, that kind of thing. So we used to like do some paid advertising with them, you know, like a half-page advert in the local. Because obviously what we were trying to do at the time was reach locally rather than we wouldn't even imagine of sort of making a bigger reach. It just didn't make sense at the time. So yeah, that's the kind of thing we would, you know, gym adverts, things like that really that were popular and what we would pay for.
Yeah. And have you made that shift now into the kind of paid advertisement for like the social platforms? Do you look into like Google ads, Facebook advertisement, for example?
Oh, 100%. So your money is much better spent online. You know, and you know, magazines and editorials, they're not cheap. And you'd spend thousands of pounds on these things that would give you very, very little back. And you can spend a fraction of that money online and gain so much more, like your Google ads. I rarely do that anymore, but you know, back then, once I switched and converted, I found that I was, you know, that was a much better way of spending a marketing budget than sort of a magazine was, for example.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously you're kind of known now for doing quite a lot of these celebrities slash influencers. So how did you actually get into that whole world? Is that kind of something that was natural? Did somebody just come to you and kind of ask, like we talked about earlier, did people approach you, or was that something that you actively went out to search for?
That was something, again, like I didn't even understand that was a thing back then, you know, like that's what you should do and that's what you should get people to do. And I suppose this kind of lady sort of helped me as well in that, you know, she came to see me, and then I had clients who, you know, back then probably had very small pages, you know, 6,000 to 8,000 followers type of things. And those clients grew with their pages grew with our brand. And then suddenly, obviously influencers grow much more phenomenally than a clinic will. And some of it was just sort of by accident or by chance, or should I say luck really, that some of my best clients were developing these pages that were huge. And they, you know, obviously they were really happy with their treatment, so they would post about it. And that's when it really clicked. I thought, oh my God, I mean, they were doing it without me asking type of thing initially. But that was when the penny dropped, and I was like, oh my God, like my page has like tripled from this one person just telling people what she's had done and what, you know, how she feels about it. And that's when I thought, you know what, this is something that I can really kind of use here and use for more marketing and things like that. And I think from the back of her, so once you start doing a few influencers, that the great thing about that is that obviously they have such a big reach that then they reach out to their fellow influencers, and what happens then is you know, you become someone that they trust. And I think that's the important thing, is sometimes it is worth using someone who is actually a genuine client of yours, because then it comes across really genuine to their followers and their reach. I think the dangerous thing nowadays is you can see through those people who have just been paid for the ad, or they've been paid for that story, and it becomes disingenuine. So I think if you really, really want to get out there, is use someone that you really know, use someone who has a good following, or and they're already a good client of yours, or someone you think, you know what, they might be bigger in future, is really kind of work with them. And it might not be that you know, I've never paid for an influencer, but it might be that you want to give them a bit of a discount, or you might give them priority for appointments, or you know, you're going to look after them essentially. And I think that's the most important thing, is if you can do things like that, and you can use someone that's genuinely going to present your brand well, then over time that is really going to escalate, and you're going to have a huge reach, and it's going to be a genuine reach. You're not going to attract people that basically are not, you know, not that interested. And also you want to kind of target the right people. So for example, if it's an influencer who you think actually they're not the kind of right aesthetic for my clinic, then you might not want to use them. You might want to use someone who actually probably has a really good following in a certain market or in a certain age group. And they're the kind of things you want to take into consideration as well.
Yeah. So off the back of obviously using these influencers, is there kind of any kind of pros and cons that come from that, and kind of social media in general as well? Do you find any kind of, obviously we look at the pros as kind of as a social media agency, but at the same time there potentially could be some backlash, or potentially younger audiences that start approaching you wanting treatment, for example, because some of these audiences are young. Is that something that you find as a challenge, or is that pretty much just something that kind of doesn't really happen as much?
I mean, it does, but obviously I think you know, most clinics have a kind of obligation to make sure they're not treating anyone under 18. And you can you know, that there are filters and settings that you can apply to your clinic's account, for example, to put, you know, that your reach is 18 plus type of thing. And I think naturally, I think a lot of young girls know that they can't seek treatment at certain places. They don't tend to ask. But yes, you're right. There is you know, you've got to be mindful of those kind of images, as well as Facebook, Instagram and Facebook are quite restrictive with before and afters with procedures like that. So you really got to find another way around that, and maybe doing advertising based on other things or other treatments that you offer that don't necessarily have the before and after images. Because obviously everyone is body conscious, and we do have morally we have an obligation to make sure that we're not sort of reaching the wrong audiences. But I think picking the person you're kind of using for your social media as well is really important. So again, you know, you need to target someone who probably has a little bit of an older audience.
Definitely.
And not younger. And then the other problem with social media is obviously that is the problem. It's the kind of disingenuine things or accounts that kind of buy followers and have a lot of bot comments, that kind of thing. And you know, back then it was very hard to kind of know that or even spot that, but nowadays I think it is a little bit easier. But you don't want to, if you are paying someone, you don't want to waste money on someone who doesn't really have the following that they might make out.
And I suppose that's kind of the risk that you need to sometimes take as well, because if you are, you never guarantee that their audience is going to engage in that. And sometimes it's somebody small who you just don't even think to themselves could actually get you increased in kind of contact afterwards, or following, or whatever it may be. So I know with the Roo, for example, they used one of the people who was probably the most popular influencer out there within the UK, and it didn't give them the same reaction as somebody else who had less following. And their expectations were it was going to just boom from that point onwards. But in fairness, it didn't. So it's always just kind of looking at who's right for you, like you've said. So
I also think it's about how open that influencer is, because there's a difference between half-hearted tagging and there's a difference between someone really explaining their journey. And that's what I found is, you know, one of the first influencers I used was someone, like I said, who naturally did everything for me. She had 8,000 followers at the time. And she's now on sort of 900k plus, but from that 8,000, it just, because it was all genuine, this is what I've done, this is what, and it was really very emotive talk. I think you mentioned it earlier. You said, you know, people really sort of, they like that, you know, people are captured by emotions and by feeling and how they like to feel after a treatment. And I think, again, it's that influence, engaging that audience and saying, this is what I've had done, these are the mistakes I've made before, now I'm doing this and I'm really happy. And it's how it's portrayed on their account, not just, oh, here I am, tag boring. You know, no one really cares about that.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, you, and I think that's you. I know I've never used a contract, but I think that's a really good point. Is if you're going to spend money on someone like that, is to get them into contract to say, look, I want something a little bit more interactive. I want some, you know, maybe some speaking bits where you're going to talk about the treatment, where you're going to explain it. And I think then people are a bit more engaged and kind of know what to expect from the journey as well.
Yeah, I think the good thing about the contract is that you might pay, I don't know, £1,000 to get an influencer, and somebody might just do one post, and that wasn't what you was expecting. You was expecting
Yeah.
a kind of a full journey and a kind of documentation of what actually the whole process felt like.
Yeah.
And that's why we find it really important that you actually, if you are going to take that step into paying for somebody, you have that contract in place, because then it's kind of they know what they're expected, and then you know what you're going to get in return for your investment. So definitely. So I mean, I asked this question to one of somebody else that you know, when we did the podcast with Vivian. Have you got any influencers who kind of like became a bit diva-ish or kind of expected more? You don't have to name names, but anybody you kind of just, who you kind of came through the door and weren't who you was expecting, for example?
No, I the ones I've used and treated, they're actually just, they're pretty amazing actually.
Yeah.
What I will say is the divas have been, not necessarily people I've met and treated, but it's the assumptions that I've had to deal with. So people DMing me, big accounts, big influencers, assuming that I have done XYZ for free and that I'll do them for free. And that's just not how it works. So and I think that's where it gets a bit insulting, because you're like, well, actually, no, that person paid for their treatment. They were happy with their treatment, and then they talked about it. So no, I'm not going to do it for free for you, just for an exchange for a story, you know. So, and I think that's where it becomes a little bit like, you know, respect is two ways. Like, I will look after you, but at the same time, you know, there can't be automatic assumptions about things. So yeah, I mean, you know, don't get me wrong. If, you know, Angelina Jolie DM'd me and was like, "Can I have a freebie?" I'd be like, "Yes, I'll fly to you." So,
if you were starting off like most people are, do you think you'd have that same mindset, or do you think it's just because obviously you're a bit more established now and you've got that reputation? If you were kind of still really young into the game of social media, for example, and you only had like 1,000 followers, would you then be more inclined to potentially do that free treatment?
I think I've always been a bit like that, but I would say to someone is completely grab that opportunity. Like, if it's someone with a big influence, of course, you don't be stupid and throw that away. I think what I would say is, initially what I used to do is I never had the balls to kind of reach out to people. Whereas if someone DM'd me right in the early days and said, "Can I come in and maybe we can," I would totally be open for that. And I've done that before, where I've said, you know, she's got 500k followers, of course, right? You come in, let's have a chat, let's see what you want to do. And we've taken it from there, but I've never said, "Oh no, go away." That's suicide. You know, it's a wasted opportunity for you.
Exactly.
So if that person has actually bothered to DM you and they're clearly interested in your work, and they're clearly interested in what you do, so you've already kind of half got them as a patient or a client. And then it's your job to kind of convert them and then see how you can work with them if they've got a really good influence. Then absolutely do what you can, you know, do what you're comfortable with, but do what you can, and it will really help your business.
Favorite influencer?
Oh, I've got so many. I can't. They're all lovely.
That's fine. And the final question from me is kind of like, if it wasn't for social media and the way that you've driven it over your platforms, do you feel like you'd be as successful as you are?
Absolutely not. So I think for me, you know, Instagram has taken me from the local, you know, good cosmetic doctor, great, you know, they were happy, to kind of more of a global reach, more of an international, more of a UK wide reach. And I think, you know, 100% it's taken my business to another level. You know, your talent doesn't change, but you know, your reach and your growth changes. And people are nowadays, they're willing to travel to see someone that they really want to see.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, just one more last question. I said that was my last question, but just one just came into my mind when you were just saying that. You've got obviously two platforms for you. You've got the Skin Doctor Clinic's social page, and then you've got your own as Dr. Salenna.
Yeah.
What was your kind of mindset in that? Why did you kind of split off and kind of have your own profile as well as obviously having your clinics as profiles?
I think that's really important because as a physician, I have my own skill set of what I'm good at, but I don't want to not showcase what the clinic is able to offer as well. And I think people my engagement was really rubbish. For example, if I started posting about skincare or facials, and because that's not what had driven people. People that were following me were there to see my injectable treatments. That they were there to see my before and afters. They weren't necessarily there to see my machines and my this, that, and the other. So for me, it got to the point where I thought, you know what, this isn't working. So I need to kind of separate that and actually let them have that platform for those people that are interested in that kind of thing, and more for the locals, because again, my followers are just everywhere. So, you know, my biggest percentage is in London, and then it's Leeds, and then it's Manchester. So, you know, for your local clinic, for their local treatments, what your other staff are doing, it's really important, I think, to separate that.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for your time. I know you were busy and you probably could have gone out for some food today because lockdown's lifted.
I'm boring during the week.
But obviously, thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, we'll speak soon.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Just to kind of FYI for anybody who is listening to this, if you ever want to speak to us around your own social media, you can contact us at contact@socialinstinct.co.uk. Alternatively, you give me a call directly on 0777 2547 459. Speak soon. Thank you.